Chief Justice John Roberts walked into that hearing, a figure of immense power and authority, believing he'd seen every challenge Washington could offer. For decades, he had navigated the intricate currents of the nation's capital, a master of legal discourse and political subtlety. His very posture, erect and unyielding, spoke of an authority earned through years at the pinnacle of the legal world. He was the embodiment of judicial power, a man whose pronouncements shaped the very fabric of the nation, from civil rights to corporate regulations. But on this fateful day, in the hushed, almost reverent atmosphere of room 2141 of the Rayburn House office building, something extraordinary was about to unfold. It wasn't a bombastic political debate, nor a routine legislative inquiry. This hearing became a quiet storm, a confrontation that would expose uncomfortable truths about power, privilege, and the elusive nature of justice in America. The air was thick with anticipation, a palpable tension that transcended the usual formalities of Capitol Hill. Every camera click, every whispered aside, every subtle shift in posture among the assembled press and staffers underscored the gravity of the moment. Across the polished mahogany table, facing the Chief Justice, sat Representative Jasmine Crockett of Texas. A former public defender, new to Congress, she possessed a quiet intensity, a sharp intellect, and an unwavering commitment to the principles she championed. Her demeanor was calm, her gaze steady, a stark contrast to the often theatrical performances common in congressional hearings. She wasn't here for political theater. She was here for accountability, for the countless voices she represented who felt unheard and unseen by the very system designed to protect them. Roberts, with his practiced, almost imperceptible smile, exuded the confidence of a man who believed himself beyond challenge, a master of the game. He had faced down senators, presidents, and public outcry before, always emerging with his composure intact, his authority undiminished. But Crockett wasn't playing his game. She was about to turn his own words, his own institution's supposed values, against him, exposing a hypocrisy that had festered for decades, a chasm between the lofty ideals of justice and its often gritty reality. The initial perception of a seasoned legal giant facing a freshman congresswoman was about to shatter. This hearing became a reckoning, a moment of profound clarity that would force a nation to confront uncomfortable truths. The stakes couldn't be higher. The very credibility of the Supreme Court, the trust of the American people in their justice system, and the future of a nation grappling with its ideals of fairness and equality. We're about to dive deep into the untold story of this significant clash, revealing every calculated move, every moment of raw truth, and the profound impact it had far beyond the marble halls of Washington. Prepare yourself, because what you are about to witness will redefine your understanding of power and justice in America. Stay with us, hit that like button, and subscribe to join us in this relentless pursuit of truth. To truly grasp the magnitude of this confrontation, we must first understand the distinct paths that led these two formidable figures to that pivotal moment. Chief Justice John Roberts, as the head of the Supreme Court, leads the judicial branch of the U.S. government. These rulings affect everything from healthcare and voting rights to environmental protections and personal freedoms. The integrity of this court, therefore, is paramount to our democracy. For years, however, critics have pointed to a lack of a binding ethical code for Supreme Court justices. Unlike lower federal courts, the highest court operates largely under its own self-imposed guidelines, with a system of internal review that many argue is opaque and insufficient, allowing for potential conflicts of interest and the appearance of impropriety to go unchecked. This has led to a growing public skepticism about the court's impartiality. Jasmine Crockett, on the other hand, came from the trenches of the legal system. As a public defender, she witnessed firsthand how justice often hinged not on the merits of a case, but on access and connections. She saw ordinary people, like a single mother denied financial aid over a clerical error, or a truck driver whose brother was denied medical care in an immigration facility, face insurmountable odds. These experiences forged her into a voice for the unheard, determined to bring accountability to power. The air in room 2141 thickened as Representative Jasmine Crockett began her questioning. Chief Justice Roberts, ever composed, offered the practiced smile of a man confident in his control. He affirmed the court's adherence to a strict standard of ethical conduct, even in the absence of an official code. Crockett absorbed his words, her gaze steady, a subtle nod acknowledging his statement. Then the first precise cut, delivered with surgical calm. "So help me understand," she began, her voice calm, measured. "If that's the case, why was there no disclosure about the relationship between Justice Merritt and a political donor whose case came before the court just last year?" Roberts, his smile vanishing, deflected, citing ongoing ethical reviews. "Right," Crockett responded, her tone devoid of emotion. "But you can speak on precedent, correct?" Roberts agreed. "Yes, great," she continued, "because from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, the Supreme Court has historically used the appearance of impropriety as a benchmark. It's not just about whether something is technically wrong, it's about whether the public has reason to believe something might be." Roberts shifted, acknowledging the appearance standard. "Then wouldn't failing to disclose a close relationship with someone who financially benefits from a court's decision look improper?" Crockett pressed, her voice unwavering. Roberts, now visibly less at ease, tried to pivot to hypotheticals. "I'm not," Crockett shot back. "I'm quoting facts from your own court's financial records." The temperature in the room began to rise. Roberts straightened in his chair, his eyes cool, scanning Crockett's expression, but she didn't flinch. "I'm quoting directly from the disclosure forms, Chief Justice," she reiterated, her voice slower, more deliberate. He cleared his throat, mumbling about the forms being compiled by the court's administrative office. "But do you review them?" she asked, her head tilted slightly. "Do you personally make sure what's submitted is transparent and truthful?" The pause was brief but telling. "There is a system in place," he replied. "Each justice is responsible for their own disclosures." Crockett leaned back, a silent, knowing expression on her face. "Interesting," she said, her voice dropping half a register. "Because where I come from, if you're responsible for your own oversight, you're not being held accountable. You're just checking your own work." Roberts, visibly agitated, attempted to redirect, invoking the judiciary's sacred independence. "Respectfully, Congresswoman," he began, "the judiciary was designed to function independently of the legislative and executive branches. Our role is to interpret the law, not to be governed by political pressure. And no one here is trying to do that," Crockett countered, her voice firm, resolute. "We're not trying to tell you how to rule. We're trying to understand why certain patterns keep showing up and why they keep going unchecked." She held up a hand, not to interrupt, but to frame her next impactful question. "I spent years in criminal courtrooms across Texas, watching judges lecture young men, black, brown, white, didn't matter, about taking responsibility, about how even the appearance of dishonesty could ruin their lives. So forgive me if I don't buy that the nation's highest court can't be held to a similar standard." Roberts shifted again, his composure now a thin veneer. "Congresswoman, I do understand your point," he conceded, "but we have always taken concerns seriously and responded with internal review and integrity." "You have no binding code," Crockett cut in, her voice sharp, precise, "and the only review comes from inside the house. That's like asking a fox to file a security report on the hen house." A low murmur swept the room. Cameras clicked furiously. Reporters leaned forward, sensing the shift. Roberts's fingers tightened on the edge of the table. "The court is not above criticism," he conceded, his voice strained. "But I would remind the Congresswoman that respect between co-equal branches is essential." Crockett's gaze was unwavering, a brief flicker of frustration crossing her face. "I respect the court," she said. "I respect what it should be. But respect without honesty is just decoration. And the people who elected me, they didn't send me here to admire your robe. They sent me here to ask why the rules seem different depending on who wears the robe." The game had shifted. Roberts was on thinner ice than he could have imagined. The air in room 2141 crackled with an almost unbearable tension. Chief Justice Roberts, though still outwardly composed, carried the subtle tremor of a man whose carefully constructed defenses were crumbling. Crockett, sensing the shift, allowed a brief, pregnant silence to settle, her eyes fixed on the Chief Justice. This was not about rhetoric anymore. It was about raw, undeniable facts. She reached for the next set of papers in her folder, thin, unassuming, yet carrying the weight of a truth that would shatter the court's carefully cultivated image. She slid one page forward on the desk, adjusted the mic, and delivered the first direct hit, a precise legal jab. "Chief Justice," she began, her voice calm, clear. "Are you familiar with Dalton vs. Mason County, decided in the Fifth Circuit in 2009? The Fifth Circuit is a federal appeals court covering Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi." Robert squinted, a flicker of calculation in his eyes. "Vaguely," he replied, attempting to dismiss it as a mere procedural ruling involving judicial recusal. "You're not mistaken," Crockett affirmed. "It involved a judge who failed to recuse himself despite having indirect financial ties to one of the law firms involved in the case. The ruling made it clear appearance alone was grounds for removal." She tapped the edge of the page, the sound echoing in the sudden stillness. "And yet just last year, Justice Harlan participated in Macon versus Delta Rail, a case where his longtime friend and financial backer stood to gain significantly from the ruling. No recusal, no explanation, no transparency, and the decision came down 5-4. This wasn't just a question, it was a surgical strike, a scalpel to the soft tissue of the court's defense, exposing a glaring contradiction. Roberts exhaled slowly, his composure now visibly strained, his face a mask of controlled discomfort. "Congresswoman, I'm not here to litigate individual cases." "I'm not asking you to," Crockett countered, her voice unwavering, her gaze piercing. "I'm asking you how a court built on the principle of fairness expects the American people to keep faith when its decisions read more like backroom deals than balanced judgment." A few gasps, not loud but real, rippled through the gallery. A staffer's pen clattered to the floor, the sound amplified in the sudden, profound silence. Roberts leaned into the mic, his voice tight, a hint of desperation creeping in. "Your language is inflammatory." "And your silence," Crockett replied, her voice still calm, almost serene, "has been even worse." She didn't rush, letting the full weight of each phrase settle, allowing the truth to sink in. Then came the impactful pivot, connecting abstract legal principles to the raw, lived experiences of ordinary Americans. "There's a woman named Carla Jennings in my district," Crockett continued, her voice now imbued with a quiet, searing passion. "Single mother, worked nights at a hospital for 20 years. Her son was denied financial aid because of a clerical mistake that left her looking like she owed back taxes. She appealed all the way up to a federal court and was told in so many words, 'Tough luck.'" She paused, looking directly at Roberts. "But a billionaire with private ties to a sitting justice can get their case heard, argued, and ruled in less than 4 months with favorable results." Roberts's eyes narrowed, his hands now folded a little too tightly, the tremor more pronounced, his usual calm shattered. He hadn't anticipated this level of preparation, this direct, personal challenge that bypassed all his practiced defenses. He stammered about limited resources and difficult decisions. "That does not imply favoritism," he insisted. "But perception matters, doesn't it?" she asked, her voice dropping half a register. He nodded. "Of course. Then I suggest you start caring a little more about what the people are seeing," Crockett concluded, her voice rising slightly but still controlled. "Because right now they're not seeing justice. They're seeing power protecting itself." For the first time, Roberts had no counter. The room was utterly still, every eye fixed on the exchange. Crockett, with the quiet confidence of someone who had just landed a decisive blow, flipped another page. "I came here today with respect, but I also came with facts. And the facts say your institution has a problem, a deep one, and it's time someone stopped pretending otherwise." She then delivered the ultimate mic drop, quoting Roberts' own words from a 2013 Harvard Law commencement speech. "Your credibility is your currency. The moment people stop believing in your integrity, everything else collapses." She pressed him, her voice sharper now. "How does credibility survive when public trust in your institution is at its lowest in decades? When polls show that more Americans believe the court is driven by politics than by principle?" Roberts had no answer, his silence a stark admission. "You called this passion? It's not, it's precision," Crockett declared, her voice firm, resolute, cutting through his attempts to dismiss her. "I'm not yelling, I'm not speculating. I'm asking why Americans like Carla Jennings are held to standards your justices can ignore in plain sight." She paused, letting the weight of her words hang in the air, then delivered the final, crushing blow. "Credibility is currency, and right now, your institution is in overdraft." The line hit harder than anything she'd said all morning. Robert sat motionless, his carefully constructed facade shattered, leaving only the raw, uncomfortable truth in its wake. His silence was not a tactic. It was the silence of a man who had been utterly disarmed. The reverberations of Jasmine Crockett's testimony exploded across the nation, a digital earthquake shaking the foundations of public perception. The moment her words, "Credibility is currency, and right now, your institution is in overdraft," left her lips, they were captured, clipped, and disseminated with lightning speed. Within minutes, clips of Crockett's relentless questioning and Roberts's visible discomfort were spreading like wildfire across social media platforms. On X, formerly Twitter, hashtags like "Nashuk Crockett Mafis Roberts," "Shanar's Judicial Ethics," "Shanar Supreme Court Overdraft," and "Inaka Truth to Power" began trending globally, dominating conversations and sparking furious debate. Short, impactful snippets of her testimony, particularly the "fox in the henhouse" analogy and the "credibility is currency" line, were remixed, memmed, and shared millions of times on TikTok and Instagram Reels, reaching audiences far beyond the traditional political sphere. A barista in a coffee shop near the Capitol paused mid-order to replay a clip of Crockett's exchange. A young black girl in a Dallas classroom asked her teacher, "Is she a lawyer?" The message was clear. This was not just for the political elite. This was for everyone. Traditional media outlets, initially caught off guard by the raw power of the exchange, quickly pivoted. Cable news channels ran endless loops of the hearing, bringing in panels of legal experts and political commentators to dissect every nuance, every pause, every shift in body language. "Is this the end of the Supreme Court's untouchable image?" asked one prominent anchor, reflecting the national conversation. Major newspapers, from the New York Times to the Wall Street Journal, prepared scathing front-page stories, highlighting the ethical quagmire exposed by Crockett. Debates raged across morning shows and evening news programs, with some praising Crockett's courage and precision, while others, particularly conservative pundits, attempted to dismiss her as grandstanding or engaging in political theater. However, the sheer force of her argument, backed by undeniable facts and Roberts' own evasiveness, made these counter-arguments seem hollow, almost desperate. The narrative had shifted, and it was Crockett who was driving it. The most profound impact, however, was felt not in the Beltway, but in homes and communities across America. For years, ordinary citizens had felt a growing sense of disillusionment with institutions they once revered, a quiet cynicism born of perceived unfairness. The stories of Carla Jennings and Jorge Salgado, once isolated examples of individual hardship, now resonated as powerful symbols of a broken system, giving voice to a collective frustration. "She spoke for all of us who've been told tough luck by the system," commented a woman from Ohio on a viral Facebook post, echoing a sentiment felt by countless others who had experienced the frustrating disconnect between legal theory and lived reality. A truck driver from Arizona shared Salgado's story, adding, "This is why we lose faith. It's not about justice, it's about who you know." The video clips, raw and unfiltered, bypassed traditional gatekeepers, reaching millions who had long since tuned out political news. People who had never paid attention to Supreme Court procedures were now glued to their screens, watching a congressional hearing with an intensity usually reserved for sporting events. In homes across the country, people who had stopped trusting the system felt something they hadn't in a long time: representation that didn't look like compromise. The consequences for the involved parties were immediate and far-reaching. Chief Justice Roberts, though not publicly commenting further, faced unprecedented scrutiny. His carefully cultivated image of impartiality is severely tarnished, and calls for a binding ethical code for the Supreme Court intensified from across the political spectrum, gaining bipartisan support. For Jasmine Crockett, the hearing was a watershed moment. Her social media following exploded. Her name became synonymous with integrity and fearless advocacy, and invitations to speak, interviews, and public appearances flooded her office, transforming her into a national figure overnight. The damage control statements from the court and its allies seemed hollow, only reinforcing the perception of an institution out of touch. The power of truth, delivered with precision and unwavering conviction, had cut through the noise, leaving an undeniable mark on the national consciousness. The conversation had shifted, and the people, armed with newfound clarity, were ready to demand more. The echoes of Jasmine Crockett's voice, calm yet unyielding, continued to reverberate long after the gavel fell in room 2141. Her confrontation with Chief Justice Roberts was not merely a fleeting moment of viral fame. It was a pivotal event that exposed the fragility of unchecked power and the enduring strength of truth. Crockett's victory was not one of legal triumph in a courtroom, but a profound moral and ethical one in the court of public opinion. She demonstrated that courage, precision, and an unwavering commitment to facts can indeed prevail, even against the most formidable and insulated institutions. Her integrity, honed by years of fighting for the voiceless, shone brightly, illuminating the path forward for a more accountable judiciary. The principal lesson etched into the national consciousness by this extraordinary exchange is clear. Justice, in its truest form, cannot exist without transparency and accountability. When power operates in the shadows, shielded by tradition and self-regulation, it inevitably erodes the very trust it claims to uphold. The Supreme Court, once perceived as sacred and beyond reproach, was revealed to be vulnerable to the same human failings and ethical compromises that plague other branches of government. This moment served as a powerful reminder that the credibility of any institution is not inherited. It is built, day by day, through consistent adherence to ethical principles and a genuine commitment to fairness for all. The overdraft of trust that Crockett so eloquently articulated was a wake-up call, not just for the court, but for every American who believes in the promise of equal justice under law. The long-term consequences of this hearing are still unfolding, but its legacy is already taking shape. Calls for a binding ethical code for Supreme Court justices have gained unprecedented momentum, transforming from a fringe demand into a mainstream imperative. There is a renewed public demand for greater oversight and transparency within the judiciary, pushing for reforms that ensure no one is above the law. More importantly, Jasmine Crockett's fearless advocacy has inspired countless individuals to question, to challenge, and to speak up in their own lives. Her story is a testament to the idea that change doesn't always roar in with banners and slogans. Sometimes it enters quietly, with one voice, a voice that refuses to flinch when confronted by power. It showed that the sacred can and must be questioned, and that power unchecked isn't order, it's erosion. And maybe, just maybe, a little discomfort in that hearing room was exactly what justice needed. To you, the viewer, this video is more than just a recounting of events. It is a call to action. Be vigilant, question authority, seek the truth even when it's uncomfortable. Do not be silenced by the complexities of the system or the arrogance of those in power. Your voice, your engagement, and your demand for accountability are the true engines of change. This channel is dedicated to exposing the truth, to giving a platform to the unheard, and to fighting for a world where justice is not just an ideal, but a lived reality for everyone. Want to see more unscripted accountability moments? Hit subscribe for our series, Power Under Watch. Because when we stand together, armed with truth, no power can remain unchecked.